Welcome to this week's Money and Investing Show. Kicking off the new year with goal setting. You can't achieve success without a roadmap to get there, and there's plenty to take away as Series 4 kicks off, setting your goals and success plan up for 2023. Enjoy the show. Hey guys, welcome to this week's Money and Investing Show with me, your host, Andrew Baxter, and as always, my co-host and offsider, Mitchell Laurential. Season 4.
Here we are, episode 1, season 4. Is this episode 157, something like that, if my maths is correct? How good is it? Welcome back.
It's great to be back, and what an extraordinary thing. I know when we originally sat down and set out the goal of creating Money and Investing as a podcast, you know, so many people said, oh, you want me to keep it up weekly, do monthly or fortnightly. Here we are in our 4th year. We haven't missed a beat yet.
Not 1 week.
And it's as addictive as anything. It's been a great goal to set it up. And the stretch goals we've got for ourselves this year with the podcast series is mind-blowing. So, yeah, here we go.
Well, funnily enough, the topic of today's conversation is a segue for us, AB. Thanks for leading me into that. Is goals, because we are here in early January. We're back in office. It's stinking hot here on the Gold Coast. So perfect time to sit down and really map out what the year of 2023 looks like. First off, though, we've got to review our 2022. So what are we saying to the punters out there? How are we doing that?
You kind of got me today. I wasn't expecting we'd be doing this today either, so apologies for the dress code, but as you say, it's pretty hot out there today. So, 2022, I mean, what a year, first of all, and you take stock and kind of look back, and I think reviewing what's gone behind us always gives us a great platform for what goes ahead. And I'd say arguably the biggest shift we saw last year, I mean, there was so many things last year, as you'll hear from the 2022 review we did a couple of weeks ago before Christmas. It was an incredible year, lots of change. And I think looking back at that, what's the takeaway? Yes, there was lots of change. And I think what it required from people was an enormous amount of resilience to be able to pivot, which was the cliche from, the pandemic times, but to constantly be able to deal with a new set of circumstances. There's a war in Ukraine, there was the resurgence of COVID at the back end of the year, inflation going ballistic, interest rates going up. And all of those things take up a lot of bandwidth and create a lot of anxiety for people because as human beings, we like two things. We like certainty, and equally, we like uncertainty. We like the excitement. But there was so much uncertainty last year where I think it probably burnt a lot of people, and they sort of limped across the line for Christmas. And I'm glad that one's in the cabinet and locked away, and let's take on the new year. So, it was a huge year. And I think when you look back over any year and you actually articulate all the different things that happen, there's always a lot of stuff goes on. But man, last year was particularly crazy.
It was tough. So from a personal development perspective, AB, going back and assuming that you've had some goals in 2022, you may have hit all of them, some of them, or none of them. But what kind of diagnostic process would you be using personally for some of your goals to review?
Look, I love reviewing as much as I enjoy setting goals, because it gives you a bit of an acid test or a litmus test as to how focused you've been on the things that are important to you. And I think you've got to sit back and go, okay, overall, if you looked at the year in terms of where you wanted to finish it versus where you started, how far along the line did you get? Did you get all the way along the line, some of the way, a little bit of the way, none of the way? And then breaking it down into the various areas, because there are so many different aspects to life. And I guess when you're setting goals, you've got to try and find not goals that are in all of those aspects of life, because, to be successful isn't about being a good all-rounder. It's about having a niche and excelling in it. At the same time, a lot of people do have goals across different things. So, for example, whether it's health and fitness, whether it's a relationship, whether it's money, whether it's personal growth, are some of the examples that people can fall into. And trying to break it down and say, okay, like, for example, if one of your goals for the year was to get fitter, did you do that? Or are you likely to be a candidate for the biggest loser next year? And that's the reality. You can quite quickly assess whether you achieved that goal. Now, I never went to the gym. I ate rubbish all year. I'm now 15 kilos heavier than where I was this time last year. You probably missed the goal. And so that then bodes the question, and this is why review is so important. It's not about beating yourself up for missing the goal. It's a question of, why did you miss it? Is it a goal that's actually important to you? Or is it a goal that's not? And it's the most fundamental question to ask, because if it's not important to you and it's not a priority, that's why you didn't achieve it. It's not because you failed, it's because it's just not important. It's not on your radar. There are other things that are significantly more important to you. And they are the things that swallowed up your time. So I think sort of sitting back and having a pretty thorough look at yourself is a good place to start. And then once you've gone through that painful experience of, or hopefully joyous actually, that you did achieve what it was that you were setting out to, but if you haven't, is then really start to focus on the year ahead and say, okay, blank canvas time once again. And this is why I love goal setting, because it gives everybody the ability to create and design their future in advance. You can have whatever you want out of life if you sit down, take the time to design it, make sure it's important to you, and then carefully structure the goals to get there. And I guess that's what leads us there. I just think like a year is a long time. And I know we'll talk a little bit more about the review process as we go in, but look, take the year. Are you where you wanted to be? And if you're not, why not? And the things that you excelled in, were they the things that were important to you? Probably. And the things that you were less successful at, chances are, as I say, they weren't a priority for you because they're not a prime motivator for you. So sit down with a blank bit of paper. What do you want? Because any road will take you nowhere. You got to know what you want, and then you can build goals around that.
Well, let's talk about that, because that's the fun part. And as my good friend Albert Einstein once said, the unexamined life is one not worth living. So goals are important to our fundamental existence. So in terms of that, AB, how are you setting goals? What kind of parameters are you applying? Because there's a difference between a good goal and maybe not so good one.
Yeah. But I think oftentimes, and particularly we're in the money and investing space, a lot of people kind of set goals in that area, and anything is better than nothing. Let's be really clear on that. So if you're brand new to this whole process of goal setting and all the bits and pieces around it, number one, it's not bunkum and a waste of time. It's basically the way you can guarantee that you're going to get to where you want to get to in life by setting them. If you're prepared to put the work in, of course, if being a small word with big consequences, but that's how it works. So, when you're sitting down and working through it, it's got to be something that is important to you. And sometimes, as I say, in the money and investing space, you might say, look, my goal is to make $1 million this year, for example. That might be a goal for someone from their trading. And you go, that's a great goal. It's better than nothing. But is it really the right goal? Because what happens if you achieve $1 million? Does that you never trade again? You don't need to look at the market again.
Or if you make 999,000.
Or if you make 990,000, you failed because you didn't get to the actual goal itself. So on the surface, whilst it looks to be a nice measurable goal, and people always say they've got to be measurable, and the smart system, and you've got to be able to talk about them in the present terms and all that sort of gump. The reality is sometimes that goal is just not right. That just happens to be a metric. It's not the goal itself. So a better goal in that instance would be, rather than I want to make $1 million from my trading this year, is to become a regular and consistent trader. That's something that you can control by being regular and consistent. And if you do the right thing regularly and consistently, there's a chance that you'll make the $1 million that you're looking for, but you could also make $2, $5, $10 or $20 million too.
That's really important. And I think that's where most people struggle in this instance, because it's very deflating if you put a really audacious goal on paper and you don't quite get there. All of a sudden you pack up shop, that's it, this is not for me, I'm done. Versus actually setting yourself the goal of the habits. By default, you'll get to the goal, the quantitative one at that anyway, right?
It's a default, as I say, at virtually any given opportunity. When the process is right, the results always follow. And there was a particular project you were working on last week, and I know you set yourself a very specific window of what the goal was and then what the stretch goal was. And I know deep down inside, what was driving you wasn't those two numbers. What was actually driving you was the adherence to the process that you've spent 2 years building. And by doing that, it popped out the other end, the stretch goal.
Absolutely.
And it wasn't like, oh my God, we got the stretch goal. It was like, well, yeah, that's what should happen because
we've done
this.
Yeah.
And so that sort of goal setting is crucial. It's about the process, and it's much easier, I think, for people to come to terms with that, because they don't then run out of puff and feel unfulfilled. Success without fulfillment's the ultimate in failure. So if you made 950 grand from your trading, you should be really proud, but because it wasn't the mill you set out for, you're going to beat yourself up. Love yourself, be kind to yourself. That's one of the biggest rules in life. Your self-talk, how you speak to yourself, be kind to yourself is crucial. More important than the actual metric is the process behind it, and I think that's something that we really need to roll our sleeves up and discuss more. Well,
learning by doing, AB, for our listeners out there, can we get a gauge on some of the goals you've got here for 2023 as we embark on season 4?
Okay, so if we split our goals up into two levels. Habit goals are the machinery, if you like, the engine room to drive achievement goals. So let's start with a habit goal, which then by default puts on a plate the achievement goal versus the other way around. So for me last year, I wasn't very happy with the physical condition I was in. I can give you some excuses. I'll give you lots of those. But the reality is that's all they are, is excuses. It wasn't a priority for me at that particular time. I had other things I was doing, and that swallowed my time. Sort of through the middle of the year, that changed, and I made it front and center. And so my habit goal was to allocate a set amount of time each week for fitness. Simple as that. And yeah, I can go and potter around on my farm and do stuff, but I'm talking structured fitness. And not, as you know, in my house, I have absolutely no excuse, because I have to walk past my gym that I built in my house to get to my office.
Pretty nice gym too.
I've got zero excuse, no traffic. It's not the opening hours. It's not
membership fee.
There's just no excuse. It's fully set out and it's right there, and I've got to literally walk past it every day to get to my office at home. And so it was a question then of making it a priority to not just keep walking down the corridor, but to go in there. And it was really interesting, actually. I was actually in Fiji on holiday with the kids and my wife, and we had a bit of time. Great thing about Fiji, family friendly. You get some nannies and things to look after the army of kids that we've got. I think we kept most of the island employed for the time we were there, and it created that space to go, right, go start training. And I really enjoyed it, and it just relit the candle. And sometimes you go through those phases where you know you want to do something, but you're not feeling enthused towards it, and you can just grind it out and you poke it with a stick, but you're not really getting there. And so I really felt enthused and energized. Got back, totally reset my back end of the year goals. And by keeping that habitual process in play, rather than having an achievement goal of saying I want to lose 10 kilos, which is a success goal, if you will, if that's what your goal is. Instead, it's built up the habits that have now got me in a far fitter position, using a program that I'm really enjoying doing, and every day keeps me totally engaged. And rather like the stretch goal we just talked for you, the physical loss of weight is just simply a byproduct of creating that habit, as opposed to the goal is to lose 10 kilos. I could cut my arm off and do that.
Sure.
But that's not the real metric we're after here. It's to be healthy and have vitality and so on and so forth. Also, I think, within there is a further level of sophistication in that goal, insofar as I didn't just want it to be a health and fitness goal. It was a mental health and fitness goal as well. So now I've built into there the habit of stretching, which is something I wasn't doing a lot of either. But more importantly, from a mindset perspective, is a meditation session at the end of that. And it's a must. It's not like, if you get time at the end of the workout. No. It's a must. So it becomes part of the scheduled time of the workout. Therefore, it happens every day. And I found myself not only physically enjoying the workout, but then mentally having that ability to embrace the lactic acid and the pain as I stretch it out, and then go through my recovery process, starting with the meditation, hydration and whatnot, and then start my day. And the achievement goal on the back of that, the weight doesn't actually bother me. What's actually given me more fulfillment from it than anything is the self-discipline that I've built up.
And how good you feel after doing stretching, meditating and exercising, all three, triple whammy.
I think my wife thinks I've lost the plot on occasion. Like I had one week where I'd missed and I needed to do a catch up to get there, and she was away, so I ended up double ending the day, top and bottom, which you can do at home easily. Kids are in bed, and just smashed it. And she got, this is becoming obsessive. And I said, well, it's not that. It's just that I don't want to break the chain. And I think that was the thing that came out of my trip to Fiji. And I'll talk more about that in just a few moments, not the trip, but what came out of it. Because habits, that chain, and the weight of emphasis you put on not breaking that chain. If you've got a goal of doing something every day, like not swearing, just take something really simple. I've got small kids, so using profanity, and we can all get cranky, and sometimes, in that emotional response, come out with something that's probably not what you want your kids to hear. Trying to keep that chain, is it a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, a month, not breaking the chain, becomes more important than anything. And that's the mindset goal. That resilience, that leadership that we spoke of at the back end of last year, about making the hard decisions and leading yourself and being a person of your word. All really, really important parts of it. And for anyone that wants to sort of fast track where I'm going with this, one of the best books I read last year was Atomic Habits.
Great book.
Yeah, and I've gone through that a couple of times. I know you've read it a few times too. And just the practicality of the way that book was put together reinforced so many things that I've known and I've done bits of and lots of and all of at various stages. but it just put it into a really nice multivitamin size boom. And I think for me last year, that was probably one of my biggest game changers. So yeah, I read that when I was sitting around the pool on holiday, and about 3 days into the trip, put the book down and hit the gym, and I haven't looked back. So there's a really simple example of a catalyst, the habit, the mental game of not wanting to break the chain, and then the achievement goal. Well, what would have been like most people's goals are in the achievement space actually is nothing within that process. It just happens to be the cast off, the byproduct of it, as opposed to this whole thing. What am I looking to achieve? Well, no, it's just to build the habits, and that'll take care of itself if the habits are right. So it's a really good reframe for that.
That's really awesome to hear, AB. And I guess that step that we use within our money and investing journals in particular, which, we both use diligently and have done for years now, has been followed sequentially. And I know that you've been keeping up to that even in the new year, this year, and it's you're looking great. It's looking awesome.
Feeling good. And as I say, I think the biggest shake out of it is not what I would normally associate with the goal, which was, you can tick the box, you got to that level of achievement. It's that self-worth of knowing that you've put the mental time into not wanting to break the chain. And I think, that's really, if you take a holistic look at goals, that's what they're all about. It's not about the goal itself, it's becoming the person that's capable of achieving it, that self-discipline, those habits to be the best version of you to really deliver it. I'll give you another one on the backside, because there's a habit. When you get the habit right, the achievement flicks out the other side. Alternate one, slower moving one, and maybe a little bit more complex to manage. On the farm last year, we decided we're going to put in a chili crop, and that in itself is actually, we're going to grow some chilies, but when you start growing a couple of hectares of them, it's a bit of a different proposition. So where I think a lot of people, maybe some of our listeners, can sometimes struggle with this is chunking things down. So you've got this goal. For me, it's a passion project. Look, we're not commercial farmers on that particular property. It's enough to keep the tax office happy, and it's a bit of fun to sort of have a crack at. And that's not to sort of downplay anyone that's in the farming space. I know how hard farming is on a serious basis, because we do that as well. But the reality of that was that when you get a project that's quite big and has a lot of moving parts, it can become overwhelming. And again, I think one of the secrets to successful goal setting is to chunk things down into bite-sized amounts that you can process and deal with, and start to build momentum up. So, okay, we're going to take a paddock and it's going to be planted out with chilies. So let's break that down. What are some of the things that we need? Well, we've got the ground, we own the farm, we've got the equipment, or most of the equipment. We've got to put in, got to get some chili seeds from somewhere, and you're not going to go down to Bunnings and pay $5 a packet for a hectare's worth of seeds. So where can you find commercial seeds, and Okay, got the seeds. How do you grow them? What time of year do you plant them? What do you need to plant them in? Okay, you plant seeds in dirt, but you got to get the planter trays, and then you got the staging to put them in, then a polytunnel to bring them on, and then the spray units to keep it moist in there, and then you've got to have the rotavator or plough equipment to till it or get the soil ready, and then the bright sort of fertilizer on the back of it, and then the irrigation stuff. So there's a 22,000 litre tank that just went in the other day, which has got timers on for doing the watering, and then then you've got to schedule the time out to actually do all of this rather than just have on the project board. That's actually, I don't actually think it's that big a project compared to some of the things I've done, but it's a really good example of chunking something down. Okay, here's the next thing, here's the next thing, and there's the next thing. So for anyone that's sort of sitting there with their blank canvas and they go, okay, this is what I want out of life. How do I get there? Chunk it down. Don't get overwhelmed, because I think that's why so many goals end up not making it past Australia Day, because it just seems too big. But if you can break it down as to what can I do today that's going to progress me closer to achieving that particular goal. And it can be the most small thing. It could be, I've got to make a phone call, I've got to order something online, take 10 minutes out to sketch out what my vision is for it, or whatever it might be. But by breaking it down into those small bite-sized chunks every single day, you're creating momentum by actually actively taking a positive step towards where you want to go to. Because ultimately, if you're not moving closer towards a goal, you've actually moved away from it. If you don't do anything today, it's not that you're in the same place. You're actually further away because you've got less time to get there.
Sure.
So every day you got to just be chipping away at something and moving it forward. That could be a development. Could be you're looking to do a property development, or it could be something far more simple, that getting started with your course. Okay, well, where do I start? Well, module 1's a pretty good place, and chunking it down 2, 3, 4, 5, getting your broking account open, setting up your watch list, funding your account. They're all small steps, but collectively, when you put them together, that's how success comes along. So 2 different examples there for you.
That's awesome. And I guess the challenge with all of this, as you alluded to, is remaining accountable to your goal, because nothing good happens overnight. There is a period of time, when we speak about time being your ally, Being accountable, AB, what's the best advice you could give out there to those struggling with that?
Accountability, I think, is something that people often think you need to look outside for. And in actual fact, you can internalize it in a couple of ways. Number one, the money and investing planning system that we have has a daily, a weekly, a monthly, and a quarterly review section in there. And it may seem, oh, Andrew, that would be really nice in my world, but I'm too busy to do all that sort of stuff. And the only reason you're too busy is because you're not taking time to plan stuff. We've all got the same amount of time. If you take time to really plan it out carefully and to make sure that you're really structured in the way you do that, you actually create time. And that's the hardest hump to get over. And I know from personal experience earlier on in life, and to be fair, sometimes to this day, and just the same as it is with some of the users of this system, is that when you find yourself in a situation that you're a bit overwhelmed and busy, first thing you throw out, get rid of that plan. I've just got to get on and do. I don't have time to sit around here. And that sort of action-taking mindset, I remember my dad's exactly about these bull in the china shop, let's just get started. My father-in-law's the same. Whereas I like to take a step back, not to be lazy, but to actually think about what we're trying to do so we can be more efficient with it. And sometimes thinking and planning is just as important as actually doing, as long as you do all three of them.
Gotcha.
It's not, I'm a thinker, you're a planner, and you're a doer. You've got to be all three if you want to get stuff done in your life. So holding yourself accountable on a daily, weekly, monthly basis. So today, was it a good day? Did you get everything done on your list? What are you bumping across? What are your priorities? Why are they in there? What are the habits? What are your segmentation rituals? All this stuff that we cover online in the teachings of how to use that system. At the end of each week, anyone can have a bad day, and sometimes a bad day can be a bad week.
Happens.
But don't let it become a bad month and then a bad quarter and then a bad year. That's in your hands to do. And I think sitting down honestly, and I tend to do mine in two stages. I do mine on a Friday, about 3:30 on a Friday afternoon. I'll go through and I'll go, okay, business-wise, how was the week? Where do we get to? What are some of the things I've got to roll into next week, or what does next week look like? And then on Sunday is when I actually sit down and flesh it out. And if it's not Sunday night when I do it, it's Monday morning when I take my daughter swimming. So she's in the pool at squad, and I'll sit there and I'll go through my week ahead in terms of going into a bit of detail there. But I always review, and I look at the numbers, and I look at whether I've ticked off, did I get through my habit stuff every day? And if I didn't, what was the reason I broke the chain? And again, this is all about that mental resilience of, we talked, I think it was the back end of last year, one of the podcasts we did was all about leadership, and it wasn't about leading a team, it's leading yourself. Be your word. If you say you're going to do something, do it. If you've got it in your journal or your goals this year, I am going to do X. One of my mates just swam across the English Channel, things you do for charity. He's in the British Armed Forces. It was a great fundraiser for him. That was one of his goals, but it doesn't just happen. There's all those sessions in the pool, and then there's the sessions outside in the cold water because it's an open water swim, and learning how to deal with currents and all that sort of stuff. None of this stuff just happens because you've written down. You've got to put the daily work in to get it done. So that resilience, I'm going to do it and get on and do it.
I think the biggest thing as well is just not negotiating with yourself. If you make a goal and you say, this is the habit that I'm going to carry out every day or every week, whatever it is, and that's your habit that you've decided that you're going to do it. There is no negotiation with yourself. If that's what you say you're going to do, you've got to do it.
I agree 100%. I think, and just to not give people wiggle room on that, but to provide some further context to it, I think you've got to be absolutely resilient on your goals and just iron-willed about it. But I do think you need to bring some level of flexibility to how you attain it too, because if you're finding yourself in a rut where the wheels are spinning and you just can't seem to get grinding forward, sometimes you've got to change tack to still get to that goal, but you've got to do something different. You can't just keep doing the same thing. If it's not working, you've got to explore that. But you're right, you've got to be absolutely iron-willed that this is happening. It's a massive priority. So I go back to, how do you do it? Blank sheet of paper. What do you want out of life? What is the sort of thing that would leave you feeling fulfilled, happy across the areas of your life that are important to you?
Interesting. And if we think about the sequence at which we've arrived at today, we've reviewed, we've created goals and specific ones, measurable ones with a process, and then now we're accountable to them. From there, it's about doing. So your advice, AB, to those listening at this juncture right now from here on?
I think people often say, "Oh, no, it's the pointy end. This is about doing it." That's where the work starts. But in actual fact, the work's already started and been done by sitting down and taking the time to invest in what you want your future to look like. Any road will take you nowhere, as I keep saying. And by working out what it is you want, and more importantly, why you want it. Because without a why, when things get tough, it's easy to throw things along the wayside there. Having a very, very strong why is crucial. So it's not just what do you want out of life, but why do you want it? So you've got some level of clear intention. Once you've got that motivation of that why hanging over you like a ton of bricks, it should give you all the motivation in the world to actually get off your backside and start making it a reality. The challenge to that is the standards that people set themselves. And sometimes the standards they set themselves are way too high and they end up beating themselves up for it. So, I want to do this, but I don't really, no, that wasn't very good. Doesn't matter if it wasn't very good, you started. And the first, think about a journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. You've got to take that first step. And as my good friend and certainly learned man and great read, John Maxwell, talks about falling forward. Doesn't matter what happens as long as you're moving closer towards the goal. So if you start on something and it doesn't work out too well, doesn't matter you started on it, you just got to keep going, okay, that course of action isn't right. So if it's in the trading space, you might have had a couple of trades that didn't work. Do your trade post-mortem, work out what went wrong with the trade, why it went wrong with the trade, and get back on the horse and keep the next one going. It doesn't have to be perfect. And I remember I did a one-on-one session with a really, we've obviously got thousands and thousands of clients, and there's some people that I think, when I think of our client base, that I really have an affinity with, and you really want to see, kick the goals that they deserve. It's a guy called Keith Otto, and I sat with Keith and I did a one-on-one with him on Zoom a little while ago, a couple of one-on-ones actually, and he was on his second journal because he'd stuffed up laying the first one out, and I'm sure he won't mind me sharing this with you. And I said to him, it doesn't matter if it's ugly, it doesn't matter if it's wrong, it doesn't matter if you made a mistake, stick with the process. But they're the standards that he sets for himself, that it needed to be perfect. And it's like, Keith, it doesn't have to be perfect. You just need to start, buddy. And that's what he's now sort of engaged in. And it's really hard when you hear that kind of feedback, that you've got people out there with all good intention, but because they've set the standards so high on themselves, if it isn't perfect, they beat themselves up. You've got to be kind to yourself and say, listen, at least you've started. Let's modify what we're doing and keep it moving forward, rather than beat yourself up, because that self-talk can be really, really toxic. Why does this always happen to me? Oh, here we go again. I bet it's going to go wrong. Guarantee I'm going to lose money on this trade. All those sorts of negative things that people can say. And they always come true, because what you say is what you think, and what you think is what you do. So you've got to be far kinder to yourself and say, great effort. That was really good. Let's rewrite it in a different way now and see if that works even better. And that's what it's all about. It's not about conquering the world. It's conquering yourself. It's you versus you. And each day is just a slightly better version of the day before. That's how you make massive progress in life.
This is fun. I love hearing about this stuff. I know you do too. We're both addicted to this, and I hope that it's resonated with our listeners here today, AB. So thank you very much for your advice today.
Mate, it's meat and potatoes. There's nothing. If you go back, what's this, series 4? So this is the 4th one of these. So if you're not so sure about this goal setting session, have a listen to any one of the previous 3 years.
Very similar.
And they're going to be quite similar. Obviously, they're different anecdotes because life has moved on over that period of time, but the process remains the same. Work out what you want. Work out why you want it. Chunk it down into bite-sized bits that you can get your head around. Build habits that support the activity that needs to happen to achieve that chunk down goal. Go hard, go as hard as you can, be resolute on its achievement, be very flexible in the process that you take, and have fun along the way. Because, this isn't about leading a boring two-dimensional life. This is about full 4K Technicolor surround sound life on your terms. This is just the nuts and bolts that sit in the background to make it a reality.
We love it, AB. Thanks very much. That's awesome.
Absolute pleasure. Anytime. There you have it, guys. Make sure you share this podcast with somebody else that could do with a boost to get this year on track. Most importantly, give us a rating and review, and we'll look forward to hosting you next week.